Tonight begins our fourth month of exploring together the what are called the Brahma Viharas, the four qualities of mind and heart that are considered to be kind of the most wholesome emotional states, the most conducive, the kind of ground really on which all of our practice is set. And we've talked about three of the four, and tonight we'll begin the month-long exploration of the fourth one. We've talked about metta, the quality of loving kindness, a quality of mind and heart that wishes goodness and happiness for all beings without exception. Absolutely all beings without exception. It's not a romantic kind of love or care. And it's not a kind of love that involves controlling, the kind of love that says, I love you, so now do what I think you're supposed to do. But a kind of love and care for all beings that wishes all beings well. And we spent a month exploring metta, or loving kindness. The second one is compassion, an open heart that acknowledges that all beings suffer. Kind of a tender, open heart about the suffering in the world. It cares for the suffering of all beings and includes empathy, being able to see the other person's position and caring about it. And that, again, includes all beings everywhere. Compassion. The third is joy, sympathetic joy, joy with others. The ability to be happy when you see others' goodness and wholesome accomplishment. So it's not happiness if you see somebody, committing murder or something like that, and they're happy about it. That wouldn't be considered sympathetic joy, because it wouldn't be considered a wholesome or accomplishment or goodness. But sympathetic joy is a delight in somebody else's goodness and wholesome accomplishment. Their joy becomes your joy as you welcome less suffering in the world and more goodness. So we've talked about those three. And the fourth one tonight is the quality of equanimity. Equanimity is really kind of a quality of mind and heart that is said to only really come to fruition at full enlightenment. But nevertheless, we can cultivate the conditions that give rise to equanimity all the way along. It's a balanced state of mind. It's able to be present with everything that arises and neither clings to it or pushes it away. Equanimity, the ability to be balanced with everything that arises. And as I guided us a bit in the meditation, the Buddha's great insight was about the middle way, not too tight, not too loose, a quality of balance and the ability to be balanced, to maintain balance. Sometimes you've heard the metaphor used of somebody who's surfing, so that it's not like everything is just dead in the water or serene. There's a lot of movement, but the capacity to learn how to be balanced with all the ups and downs and arisings and passings away of this worldly life. The Brahma Viharas support one another. They interact with one another. They're not isolated qualities. They protect one another and balance one another. Unconditional kindness protects compassion from being directed only at particular kinds of suffering. So when we have unconditional kindness, then compassion doesn't get narrowly directed to only particular kinds of suffering. We can look at the suffering in all of its many forms. Compassion prevents love and sympathetic joy from being romantic, soupy, or overly dramatic. Prevents a forgetting of the true suffering of the world, often suffering that we cannot prevent or mitigate. So even as we're joyful at the goodness of others, or that we send love to all beings everywhere, compassion allows us to notice that we can't make suffering and difficulty not happen. No matter how boundless is our love. And sympathetic joy keeps us from wallowing in suffering. It allows us to be nourished by the goodness and wholesome accomplishments, the goodness of the world and the wholesome accomplishments of others. So they kind of balance each other and really help each other kind of navigate, again, all these ups and downs of the world. Which brings us to equanimity. The dictionary defines equanimity as mental calmness, composure, and evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. And Christina Feldman defines it as understanding what it means to stand in the midst of all experience with unshakable balance, to be responsive, yet unbroken. Equanimity. You see what's here. Pleasant, unpleasant, neutral. You're able to see it and step back a bit, to not be triggered immediately into reactivity. The ability to see something without being caught. Equanimity, the ability to be balanced with it. You see it in the context of a bigger picture. You see that it arises from infinite causes and conditions. You know it as impermanent. You're able to see what's arising in the context of a much larger picture. You see what's needed and what's possible and what is yours to do. Equanimity. Colloquially, in India, the word was originally sometimes used to mean to see with patience, to allow things to unfold in their own time. Seeing with patience, seeing with understanding about how things work. All of this points to balance, remaining centered in the middle, centered and present in the middle of whatever is happening. This balance comes from inner strength or stability, inner calm, tranquility, well-being, confidence, vitality, or integrity can keep us upright like a ballast keeps a ship upright in strong winds. Having a deep ballast. Equanimity. I'd like to invite you to contemplate for a minute a place in the mind and heart where you don't quite have all that. You know, it could be something internal, it could be something about your own body, it could be something about your mind state. Could be something about your history, could be something about your relationships, could be something about how the world is working. Something where it's a little bit hard to have equanimity. You might choose maybe not the world's most difficult thing, but something where it's a little challenging. To stand in the midst of all of that with unshakable balance, being responsive yet unbroken. And kind of let yourself know what it feels like to be a little caught there. Again, remembering that full equanimity arises and arrives with full enlightenment. So we can give ourselves a bit of a pass here if we don't have perfect equanimity at all times. So here's a place where I'm a little bit caught. Or maybe a little bit more than a little bit caught. And I'd invite you to just really kind of have that for the moment, just kind of have it in the background a little bit as I talk. And we'll come back to either that or if something else arises in the meantime to something, and work with it a little bit directly in a minute. But just kind of have that, like, with the Buddha invites us always to investigate. And so the investigation is, does any of what I'm saying make any sense whatsoever with respect to whatever it is that you're working with? Okay, so we're not making equanimity some thing, like a vitamin you're supposed to take and then, it's going to do its work, or something that you kind of get, cloak that you put on or something like that. But it's again a quality of mind and heart with which we meet these kinds of circumstances. Okay. So again, in terms of the other Brahma Viharas, equanimity is said to give selflessness to metta, not preoccupied with ourself or any particular others. Patience, courage, and fearlessness to compassion. It guards joy from being dramatic or sentimental, and brings all the ennobling qualities of heart together in final liberation. Without equanimity, each of these qualities can burn with either collapse and overwhelm, or with too much passion in either extreme, causing more imbalance and more suffering. So kind of keeping that boat in balance. We've spoken as we've gone along through the different Brahma Viharas of the near enemies and the far enemies. Far enemies are the opposite of these qualities. Near enemies are qualities that can masquerade as one of the qualities, but are actually not that. And for the far enemy of equanimity is said to be craving and clinging, hanging on to something. Often what we do is we hang on to a view about something. This is how things should be. This is how I should be. This is what should be unfolding. This is how this should work. So the far enemy is craving and clinging or hanging on. And the near enemy is indifference or stoicism, kind of white-knuckling it. So actually one of the things, I didn't say this earlier, but one of the places where you might be curious about equanimity might be in a place where you actually feel indifferent and you're a little curious about that. How come I don't have a response to this? We don't cultivate equanimity actually directly. That would very likely lead to faking it. I'm cool, everything's fine. One of the ways that we can work with equanimity is actually to notice the places where we don't have it so much. and to begin to investigate, to explore there. So a way to cultivate equanimity is to cultivate the qualities of mind and heart that support it. What qualities of mind and heart you might need to help you navigate the winds of life with mental calmness and composure. So I want to talk about those qualities a little bit. So again, bring into your mind either the same thing or maybe something else has come up where it's a little hard to have equanimity. And I'm going to go through a bunch of qualities of mind and heart, 8 of them, I think. And what I'd invite you to do as I go through is to just kind of relax and listen and see if any of them kind of ring a bell for you. You know, see if any of them are like, well, that's interesting. I could kind of explore that, or I could explore this with this in this place where I'm struggling with equanimity. So don't try to remember them all. Don't try to apply them all. But just listen with a kind of spaciousness with respect to this particular issue. And just see if there's one that really strikes you a little bit, that interests you a little bit in terms of I could investigate how to bring that to bear a little bit more. This is adapted. These are 8 items are adapted from a talk by Gil Fronsdale, and I will post that with the recording for you so you can kind of get the whole talk. I actually think it's adapted from an adaptation that I found of the talk, but anyway, you'll get whatever I got. And so the first is virtue or integrity. We work with equanimity by, when we live and act with integrity, we can feel confident about our actions and words. Knowing that we're doing the best we can. And that we're living according to the values and principles that matter and that matter to us. The ancient Buddhist texts speak of being able to go into any assembly of people and feel blameless. Kind of be available. Ajahn Chah talks about being able to listen to anybody. He was this great enlightened master, was able to pause, relax, listen to anybody, even people he thought were wrong. And to listen to them with interest and care. So virtue or integrity, really confidence in our own virtue, in our own integrity. Confidence in it. The second is a general sense of well-being, having practices that cultivate calm and ease and joy. For many of us, being in nature, being in the garden, being with our animals, exercise, movement, cups of tea. Practices that bring ease and joy and comfort to the body and to the mind. Being with good relationships can really help us have equanimity in difficult circumstances. The third one is the capacity to be mindful, to have awareness without becoming engulfed by experience, to see our experience and to see what's happening, but to see it from a larger, more spacious awareness, so that we're not completely caught up in the experience itself. There's room in our awareness for the awareness itself, for the capacity to be mindful. The capacity to concentrate, to really put our minds where we want them to be and to let go. I invited you during the guided meditation that if there was some thinking that was actually causing a constriction or a tightening or less ease in the breath, Can we concentrate on the breath and let go of that? Because it's not conducive to equanimity. That's not what we're doing right now when we're meditating. So there's no point in kind of thinking about something that brings us into constriction, because there's just absolutely no way that it can be helpful right now. So can we concentrate? Can we place our minds? And, I won't say keep them there, because of course we can't keep them there. Our minds are like puppies. But can we place our minds, and can we keep bringing them back to something that has more ease, that is more wholesome? Understanding, the fifth one is understanding or wisdom. Wisdom can teach us to separate people's actions from who they actually are. We can learn to not take the arisings in our own mind so personally. We can understand that our own thoughts and impulses are the result of impersonal and long-standing conditioning, including the DNA of our whole species. So we don't have to take it quite so personally. That's wisdom, understanding how things work. By not taking things so personally, we're more likely to stay at ease with their arising. We're more likely to be able to see it and just see it. Oh, this is what happens when I'm a human being. Anger arises. Shame arises. Fear arises. Part of my DNA. Ajahn Chah says, during the course of practicing, it is normal that you experience all the different conditions of the mind. I've been reading a lot of Ajahn Chah lately, and I just love it. He's basically saying, it all happens, never mind, It's not personal. It's not personal. So understanding that with wisdom, that it's not personal, no matter what's arising in your own mind. And similarly, to separate other people's actions and confusions from who they are. We can agree or disagree with their actions, but we can remain balanced in our relationship with them. I think that's what Ajahn Chah was saying when he was saying, I can listen to anyone. And here's this, enlightened master who could listen to stupid people with great care and kindness. Wisdom can also remember that all people are responsible for their own decisions and actions, and for the results of those decisions and actions. This can help us to find equanimity in the face of other people's suffering. We can wish the best for them, but we avoid being buffeted by a false sense of responsibility or ability to control their decisions or their well-being. The law of karma. I and everyone else am responsible only for my own experience and my own speech and actions. Number 6 is a deep understanding of the universal reality of impermanence. Everything changes. Equanimity. Everything changes. I really love my flower garden. I come home, I go to Bali in the wintertime. I come home very specifically timed to when the daffodils bloom. I have to explain daffodils to people in Bali. They want to know why I'm going home. But they're all gone, They're all gone. My peonies, they're all gone. They're all gone. Impermanence. Everything changes. Everything changes. We see that we can't hold on to anything, and this realization can bring an ever-deepening equanimity. The nice carpet in my family room floor is no more. Everything changes. The rain took care of it. A deep understanding of causes and conditions. We are not in charge. All of the infinite causes and conditions that caused that rainstorm and the particular kind of flooding that I experienced in my house. We're not in charge. We're not in charge. And the freedom of letting go, number 8, the freedom of letting go. We can see places where we used to be caught but are no longer. You know, even we can think back to things that upset us as children. Or God help us, teenagers. Things that used to really take up a lot of airtime. And that we've let go. We've understood that just letting go is how things work. I remember a relationship that I thought I would die when it ended. I didn't. You know? And to learn to let go. So just take a moment. I'll pause there for a minute. I want to tell you a story, but I'll pause there for a minute. And just see if any one of them is interesting to you. That you might take it with you tonight and inquire a little bit into whatever that difficulty place is. How would I bring a little more of this? And don't make it a thing like, you know, a rule that you have to like do that. But it could be simply an investigation of how to do that, you know. What if I investigated what letting go means with respect to this? What if I investigated, really deeply contemplated impermanence or causes and conditions with respect to that? And really deeply contemplated it, not just sort of told myself or, you know, made up a rule for myself about how I'm supposed to have equanimity. That's that kind of white knuckling, faking it. That's the near enemy. But really kind of investigate it a little bit. You could see if you want to take any of those with you. Actually, it's not exactly a story, but it's a teaching from Ajahn Chah, and he often has these really just delicious images. I want to read to you something he says. He says, the Buddha taught that this process matures at its own rate. We allow it to develop according to our innate capabilities, spiritual aptitude, and the merit we've accumulated in the past. But we never stop putting effort into the practice. Whether the progress is swift or slow is out of our control. He says it's just like planting a tree. The tree knows how fast it should grow. If we want it to grow more quickly than it is, this is pure delusion. If we want it to grow more slowly, recognize this as delusion as well. If we do the work, the results will be forthcoming. If anything that Ajahn Chah teaches over and over and over again is that sentence. If we do the work, the results will be forthcoming. You know, he could have a whole book of 400 pages with every sentence being that, and that's basically what his teachings are. If we do the work, the results will be forthcoming. Just like planting a tree. For example, and then he says, say we wanted to plant a chili bush. Our responsibility is to dig a hole, plant the seedling, water it, fertilize it, and protect it from insects. So there are things to do. This is our job, our end of the bargain. This is where faith then comes in. Whether the chili plant grows or not is up to it. It's not our business. We can't go tugging on the plant, trying to stretch it and make it grow faster. That's not how nature works. Our responsibility is to water and fertilize it. Practicing Dhamma in the same way puts our hearts at ease. So we can have equanimity also about whether or not we have equanimity. He says, if we do the work, the results will be forthcoming. And honestly, he says it 4 million times in his teachings. Equanimity, then, is the ease that allows us not to know, to be with all conditions arising, with presence, curiosity, effort, diligence, investigation, patience, and maybe a bit of a sense of humor. Yeah. All right, how do I be with this? How do I be with this? There's a Zen saying, always keep that don't know mind. And it's relevant, I think, to equanimity. If you don't understand, this is a quote from a Zen teaching, if you don't understand or if you have an answer but don't know how to respond, only keep a don't know mind. The value of a don't know mind is that it is impervious to intellectual analysis. You can't attain it intellectually. You have to practice. You kind of practice around it. You investigate. You're curious. You're patient. You're mindful. How do I be with this? With some balance, with some equanimity, in such a way that there is the end of suffering. Suffering arises not when difficult or confusing conditions arise, but when we cling in some way, internally or externally, demanding that the experience be otherwise. Forgetting that it's not personal, forgetting that there are infinite causes and conditions. I am not in charge of the world. And forgetting that everything is impermanent. A clue for each of these is the amount of narrative and the intensity and stickiness and self-identification of that particular narrative. The determination with which we know what is true, you know that place where you know what's true. It has to be this way. And with which we know what is needed. It has to be this way. These indicate when we are under the sway of past conditioning and are finding it challenging to remain present and curious, patient and interested, available and not demanding. Did I mention patience? And a sense of humor. We are encouraged to investigate equanimity in small ways. At traffic lights, in slow lines, in somebody else's joy or stumble. We don't cultivate it directly, but indirectly by being calm, patient, and interested. There's that word again. Presence with equanimity will lead easily to clear insight about what is this, and further clarity about what is mine to do. Here, now, with this. What is mine to do? We talked a couple weeks ago about how is this workable? Everything is workable. And so it's a shift from this has to work the way I think it should to how is this workable? I think I'm teaching next week, and I think, as of this moment, that's the theme of next week's talk. I will stand corrected if my mind changes itself. So can we cultivate the capacity to be with challenging experience internally and externally, to see what's here, greeting it all with curiosity, with kindness for ourselves and others, with compassion for ourselves and others, nourished by joy in the unfolding of wholesome goodness in the world and in ourselves, and see clearly what's here and what's needed from me now with this. Where is suffering and where is liberation? And I'll close with a Buddhist prayer. It's called a blessing for the journey. Let us vow to bear witness to the wholeness of life, realizing the completeness of each and everything. Embracing our differences, I shall know myself as you, and you as myself. May we serve each other for all our days, here, there, and everywhere. Let us vow to open ourselves to the abundance of life, freely giving and receiving. I shall care for you, for the trees and stars as treasures of my very own. May we be grateful for all our days, here, there, and everywhere. Let us vow to forgive all hurt caused by ourselves and others, and to never condone the hurtful ways. Being responsible for my actions, I shall free myself in you. Will you free me too? May we be kind for all our days, here, there, and everywhere. Let us vow to remember that all that appears will disappear. In the midst of uncertainty, I shall so love. Here, now, I call to you. Let us together live the great peace that we are. May we give no fear for all our days, here, there, and everywhere. Amen. Well, how clever. It's exactly 8:30. Blessings.